Yeah, so hello guys, this is TIT Guru B, and like we told you guys before that we're going to be continuing with our JavaScript lecture sessions. So today is no exception, and we are going to deal with something called API. For those into the field of software development or programming, this acronym should not be strange to you. But if you are just watching this video or don't have knowledge to programming, an API is an application programming interface. So it is that thing that acts as a mediator between two applications so that they can talk to each other. So for example, like Facebook and WhatsApp and other apps, every time you use these apps, you are using an API because they are making reference to certain data somewhere else. And we can take an example. When you use an application on your mobile phone, the application connects to the internet and sends data to a server. The server then retrieves that data and interprets it. It performs the necessary actions and it sends it back to your phone. So that's just the process of an API. And today we are going to have an example where we are going to communicate with an API that does currency exchange. Currency exchange. So we're going to deal with that API to see how we can interface our program with that API. And the API I'm using is from these guys called Fixer. So Fixer, they have all of these various currency and the current rate. So let me refresh this guy. So they have all of them, and you see here the base currency, it's euro for this data set or for this API money exchange. So the reason why I refreshed this page was because I wanted to get today's rate. So the date today is the 15th. I wanted to get today's rate so that the program can be responsive. The base rate here is euro. If we want to change or convert from USD or from Chinese yuan to whatever currency, then we can change the base rate or the base currency from Europe to whatever value we want to put there. So also you should know that all this information, they are human readable and they are also machine readable. So you can know how, once you interface with the API like we are doing now, you can know how the data actually they are written. So with this, you can know how to request information. You can know how to modify information. By default, you cannot have access to this data. Like you just go and just check what's the current rate. This is a separate JSON file. JSON is more of like a JavaScript file. So you cannot really access it like from your browser where you just go and say, okay, Google, what is the current rate today and blah, 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 blah. This one is an API. It's just a raw data that we can use to work with our program. So quickly, let me take you to my interface where I wrote the code. Because it's a little bit lengthy, so I decided to just read it on behalf of the class and then explain it to us. You can pause the video and then you can follow suit to see how things are going, and then you can also read similar code or copy the code and modify it. So with this, we are using HTML, we are using JavaScript, we are using CSS for this particular program. So in here we declare our HTML as an HTML5, and then we declare our language to tell our browser that this code was written in English, and the title of our page should be TIT currency converter. So we have a function here in the script section. So script starts from here and then it ends here. So this tells us that everything within this block is a JavaScript code. Our browser should read these informations or these lines of code as a JavaScript code. So we have a function here that's called hello, and then it's going to alight with a message that says, I love you, thanks for using TIT currency converter. It's just a separate part. But then we have something called a DOM, document object model. So we're going to add an event listener to the entire document, and then it takes two arguments. An event listener takes two arguments. So the two arguments that it's going to take, one is going to read this entire document, this entire code is going to read it, and then after it reads everything, then it can store that information so that other parts of the code can have access to certain things in the document. Because if you understand programming or writing of codes, it goes in a sequential order. So it's going to first read this line, read the next line, line 1, line 2, line 3, like that. So if you have a function or if you have a code that is on line 24, but you want it to get activated before maybe code that is on line 13, if you don't declare this function, then the program will not read that, and it will register that as an error. So that's why we have to load the entire content of this code so that every other part of the lines can reference any other thing. And then we have our function here without a name, just an open function. And the first thing we did was to disable the submit button by default. So you don't have to submit anything once you don't type anything. So that was one of the logic we applied to this code. By many forms, many online forms, by default the submit button is active and you can just press submit. So we said no, we want to disable that button. So that's what we did here. These two lines is just a comment so that other programmers who read in this code can know what we are doing in this block or in this section. So the actual thing that is going to disable that button, that submit button, is this code. So search throughout the entire document. That's what the one means. Document or query selector means search throughout the entire document and then find this hash sign or this number sign that you see here. It represents an ID. So some part of our code, we declared an ID on somewhere called submit. So find this ID that is called submit and then set the disable of this ID to true, that is, you turn it on. And then we're also going to say enable button only if there is text in the input field. So once there is no text in the input field, that submit button will not be enabled. So the moment you type something into the input field, like maybe the currency you want to find, like USD, just type U, that input field is going to get activated. So how do we do that logic? We also now say search throughout the entire document and then find this ID called currency, and once the key is up, once you lift up your hand from the key, then run this function. There is another way of declaring a function instead of you doing like this. So you can also do like this with this arrow in JavaScript. It means to declare a function, and this function have a condition that say if the currency, the length of this currency is greater than 0, that is to say, if it's USD, you tap U, that means the length of that space where we are tapping the currency, the length right now is from 0 to 1. So once you tap a value, then it's going to get activated. Now you say what? Document or query, search throughout the document, find this ID called submit, and set the disable button to false. Here we set it to true because by default. Now we say once we have even a single letter that will be tapped in that field called currency, now you should what? Disable or set the disable button to false, that you can activate the submit button. Else just keep the submit button disabled. So if there is no letter or whatever tap, number or whatever figure or character tap into that field called currency, do not enable the submit button. And then we'll move on to say now we can call our API. So like the file that I show you, we are getting that file. I just directly put the URL of that file. There's the URL directly that I just put into the file. So I just copy the URL, and this is my access key to this API. Other APIs are free. Other APIs you have to pay for them to use their APIs. So if I develop my data set, maybe to get a weather report, and then you develop in your program, but you also need to have a function in your program to read the weather forecast. Now you have to reference my API. You have to interface or talk to my program so that you can also use it in your program. Some people will say, okay, let's do it for free. Some will say, no, I took a whole lot of time to develop this code. I don't want you to have access to the code for free, so you have to pay for it. So I'm using my access key here, which will be changed after this video. In case you want to use it, it will be changed after this video. So we say that fetch. So go and find this URL, and then if you have this URL, the response, the function of this, you should change this entire file to a JSON file or a JSON function. So the raw data, change it to a JSON file, and then this other function which we have here is going to declare a constant variable. So constant means that you are not changing this variable. You are not going to create another variable called currency. So if you are not going to do something again, it is a best practice for you to use constant variable. Because even if you try to do it again, if I try to initialize another variable called currency, and once I run this code, JavaScript is going to read it as an error because we already have another variable called currency that is having a keyword called constant. So we said that this constant variable called currency, we should search throughout the entire document, is equal to this ID called currency, and whatever value the person going to type. Because if you check this data sheet, you notice that all of the currency attribute, they are all in capital letters. Okay, all of them, they are in capital letters. So if you try to put in a currency and then you type it in lowercase, it's going to read it as an error. That means it cannot find it. So even though we are accessing the API, but we can modify our program. So we said that change whatever the user will type, even if it's small case, change all of that to an uppercase letter. So that's what this line is doing. Change everything to an uppercase letter, and then you can store it into this variable called currency. Then we can also declare a variable called rate, which is also a constant that will not change. This rate is going to be equals to this currency which we have here. And this currency is reading the information from rates. And what is rate? Rate is coming from this API. So if you check here, you see rate. And rate is all of this information here. They are all rates. So that's what you see in rate. Rate is there. So rate is now going to get all of those information. And then if we have that, we declare also another variable called result. So if that is in the data of rate, if what we are looking for is actually in that list, then you say that €1 is equals to rate, which we have. But there is something, if you check this data sheet, we have all of the rates. Like you see the extension here, this one is 7.070732. Okay, we don't want all of those values. We just want to have the first three numbers after the decimal. So we said to fix 3 digits. So just fix that number to 3 digits only. We don't want the rest of them that are behind. Just give us the first 3 digits, and then you can now display the currency. So that's what our line is doing. Else, if this is not possible, before the else, we also have another condition here that is going to search throughout the entire document for an ID called result. and then we change whatever content, the HTML content, whatever word or number or whatever thing we have in this ID called result, we should change that to result. And what is result? Result is this line of code that is going to display 1 euro is equals to this rate. Okay, else we should just print invalid. So if you tap wrong number or maybe something we don't have in our data sheet, we should say invalid currency. That means we don't have this currency. So after we do that, there is something we also want to do. We want to clear the input fee and disable the button again. So if you tap in the currency and then you submit, right after you submit, we want to clear that entire input fee. We don't want anything to be there or what you tapped before to be there. So we just have to change the value to what? To null, or change it to empty. So here is empty. Okay. Now we also want to set the disable button to true. That is the submit button. We want to now reactivate that button to say, okay, go back to disable until somebody can tap in something again. If there are any errors we have on our page, we should load that error, catch the error, and then load it into our console.log. Console.log is found within our web browser. Once you right click in your web browser, you go to inspect, you see console.log. I will show you that when we get there. And then you can just return false. So that was all in the JavaScript aspect. And in our CSS, we have something called star. So everything within the block of star refers to CSS. So our star closes here or ends here. So we said that our entire body of this program should have these attributes. Our background image should be an image called TIT5, the JPEG. So there's an image that I have in a folder that I also have this code in called TIT5, the JPEG. So we're going to use that as our background image. And then we can set our background image size to be 480, and then like all of these attributes. Then also a form, the one people are going to tap in those numbers and things, the currency and the submit and thing. We should put it in the center and should have this font size. Also the input fee we're going to have should also be in this font size. There is a div where we're going to tap out something like currency converter or TIT currency converter, or convert from Europe to any currency. So that will be in a div. So that div should have these attributes. Also our header one. Header one is going to be something that we call, I'll show you if we go down. It's going to be something called TIT currency converter. So we want to have this attribute to it. And then our input fee should also have this quarter. We're also going to use an image of TIT logo. We want to put that logo on the left and the top side of the screen. So that's why we have these attributes here. We also have a button, which we want to change as well, the background color and everything of that button. So dot button means a class. Okay, whenever you see dot button or dot whatever, it means a class. We declare that as a class. So we end our star there, and in our body we have an H1 called TIT currency converter, and we have an image here that is going to go on the top left corner. So the image is called TIT8, the JPEG, and the width and the height of this image we have specified. In this form, we have two inputs. One of an ID of currency, which you saw before. One of an ID of submit, which we're always referencing above. So we want to have autofocus, means that we just want the cursor to be blinking in this currency input fee, where you see enter the currency. The cursor should automatically be placed there. We should not go and click there before. And then we can say convert now. So it's going to have an ID of submit. In this div, we have an ID of result that is going to say converting from Europe to any currency. And then we also have another button here that's going to say, once it's in a class, we created a class for it and say on click. So once you click on this button, it should call this function called hello. And what is hello function? Is the very first function we declare in this code. This is the function, hello function. It should call that function once we click on this button called please click me. It should call this function called hello function. And hello function is just going to give a pop-up to say, I love you, thanks for using TIT currency converter. So basically that's it. I couldn't go through everything by writing and then explaining to you. I just thought it was to read it and then explain to you in this form and manner. I hope you have an idea of what an APR is. Now let's try to run this code to see what happens. I have saved it. Like if you check up here, I save it in a folder called TIT class and the name is API.html. So let's come here and see if we can find it. So API.html, I'm going to try to open it in my Chrome browser to see what's the icon. In previous video we have dealt with CSS and HTML, so now you see this one is a little bit classic and stuff. So you see this our H1 called TIT currency converter, and we have our logo here in the top left corner with the width and the height of 140 and 100. So once you hover over this guy, it should change to green. Hover. So but default, this disable button, this submit button is disabled by default until you can tap something in here. And also you can see our cursor is blinking in here because of autofocus. So also our background image which we put here from our CSS. So if I come in here now and say I want to convert USD to Euro, the moment I tap in something here, you see that once you tap any letter here, this won't get activated, the submit button. If I don't have anything here, submit button is deactivated. So I'm going to tap USD, okay, and then I say convert now. So you see that 1 euro is equals to 1.180 USD. So we just take 3 digits after the decimal point or after the decimal place that we specify in our program. So this is it. If you click on this one, please click me, it's going to give a pop-up. A pop-up is going to say, this page says, I love you, thanks for using TIT currency converter. So yeah, that's just it. And to show you how it works, we can even modify this to make it as a program all by itself that people can use to convert whatever it is. So we'll update this API every time so that we make sure that our current rate is up to the tax. Maybe for Chinese yuan, 1 euro is equals to 7.641 RMB or Chinese yuan. RRD, that's Liberian dollar. 1 euro is equals to 202.45. Okay, Liberian dollars. So that's just it, and I hope you enjoyed the session. This is TIT Guru B all day and every day. We're just trying to make sure that we impart, we develop, we build, and then we connect. So feel free if you have any question or any concern about this class, or about JavaScript or HTML or CSS or Python, you can leave a comment or you can inbox me. Thanks for following TIT, and together we can make